I'm here. Hello, welcome everybody to what is now, I suppose, a weekly weekend stream with Poe the Person. Today, that's me. Today we're under the stairs, basically just rotated through 90 degrees to where I usually stream from, just so you don't have to look at my husband. I also have a hat on because I have bad hair today. So you're getting. It makes no sense for me to wearing a hat indoors. I actually believe it's quite rude, and I wouldn't do this normally, especially a hat like this. But there's a certain aesthetic to streaming that I think makes it different. It's not the same. You can do things on camera that you wouldn't do otherwise. I've seen other YouTubers from the ASMR community. These cosplayers. They wear these enormous fake eyelashes, and on camera, like on YouTube videos and in cosplay, it looks completely different to how it would look if you saw someone in real life. The enormity of their eyelashes would be quite distracting. Anyway, this is all off topic. I'm just stalling for time as I try to figure out what I'm going to talk about today. I was going to make a more in-depth video and maybe wait a little bit longer for me to read more romance novels to make this video. But I just was really into it today, and whether you're aware of it or not, if you're subscribed to the Academic Agent, you may have seen a stream last night where they discussed a lot of aspects of female and male psychology relating to dating and romance and sexual activity, and I wouldn't say I subscribe to the theory that they were talking about necessarily. There were a lot of intelligent things said, but I thought it just got me in the mood to talk about all this sort of thing. And I think I think my thesis is that romance novels that are written by women for women have they show a revealed preference of the female readership. If you look at the best-selling romance novels targeted for women, I think you'll be able to see maybe not exactly what it is that women would like their life to be, but I think there is something to learn about female psychology and how it relates to romance from reading books like this. That's not why I'm reading them, though. I didn't have much of an interest in romance for most of my life. That's actually not true. I used to watch a lot of romance animes and I read romance mangas when I was a teenager. I really enjoyed that, and I still enjoy it. It's just that I kind of got into the habit of not watching things that my husband doesn't like. Not because I need his permission or anything, but just because we watch things together. So when we started living together, when we were married, we tend to watch things that both of us can enjoy, and so a lot of the more girly stuff kind of fell off of my routine, and I kind of got out of the habit. But then something quite odd. I've talked about it before on the stream. Something quite odd happened after I got pregnant and went through the entire pregnancy and birth situation, motherhood, maternity leave, all of that. Kind of switched on a feminine part of my brain that had maybe never developed before, or was perhaps just dormant up until that point. And I suddenly became, what's the word, voracious for romance again. And I started searching around for the kind of romance that I have a taste for, that I liked, things that I don't know. I guess everyone has their own specific tastes for fiction, and there's a lot of subgenres of romance. As a huge disclaimer before I say anything else, it's only been 2 years. About 2 years. It's like the start of lockdown is when I started reading romance, really. And so I've only read about 5 of these books. And I'm not calling myself an expert by any means. And the specific books that I read, I kind of go. There's so many, right? If you ever look up, romance, like recommend me a romance novel. There's about 50 that get recommended all the time, and you have to start somewhere. So I started searching for the tropes that I was interested in, and I guess this is going to get embarrassing. There's no way of discussing this without telling you the tropes I was interested in. But let's rewind a little bit. I put out a poll on Twitter today. Most of the people who follow me on YouTube and on Twitter are male. So when I put out a poll, thinking about making this video, I put out a poll earlier today asking how many of my male followers had read a romance novel, not a thriller novel or a sci-fi or a fantasy, not a other genre fiction, literary, whatever, not a novel with a romance subplot, but an actual romance, targeted probably at women novel. Someone in the chat says the best romance novel is Berserk. I kind of agree with that, actually. I mean, I've only my experience with Berserk only goes as far as the 1997 anime, but even that I think was a really good love story. But again, not really a romance as such. It's a love story that's woven into another thing. I don't even know which pairing you're necessarily talking about, but there's a lot of people who have a romantic interpretation of the Guts and Griffith relationship. I assume you're talking about Guts and Casca, which is just beautiful. They're both beautiful, though. I love both pairings. But one of them is a lot sweeter than the other, shall we say. Anyway, so when I asked on Twitter if men had this... Sorry, my hair keeps itching my face. When I asked on Twitter if men had read any romance novels, what I got a lot of answers are about... mostly Pride and Prejudice. Some people apparently read that for school. I never read that at school. But apparently a lot of people set Pride and Prejudice to read at school. I can't imagine having to read Pride and Prejudice as a young man who's not interested at all. Noughts and Crosses is someone in the chat's just mentioned Noughts and Crosses. I read, I think, the first book of that, or maybe the first half of it. It's more of that's a young adult. A lot of young adult fiction has a pretty prominent romance subplot involved in it. I wouldn't count that, though, to be honest, in what I'm talking about today. I'm not some kind of purist who has a strict definition. It's just not what I'm going to be talking about in this video. So what is Pride and Prejudice about? It's a brilliant novel. It's one of the few... it's one of the novels that I read since developing this appetite, and I have to say it's one of the best. That's not a... that's really not an unpopular opinion. That's like a very obvious thing to say, but I was shocked by how consumable it was, how funny it was, and just how really sweet it was. And that's why I've put it as the thumbnail for today's stream. Just a really lovely read. And I think there's... Like I say, I would pity any teenage boy who had to read it for class. But for... if you're interested, if you like reading novels, I think Pride and Prejudice, if you haven't read it before, is a very good read. Whether you like romance or not, there's... I think the romance is actually quite light compared to the kind of interpersonal drama and the comedy. Every scene is, if it's not completely tragic, it's probably quite funny. And I also read, after that, I read Sense and Sensibility, which I guess is the spiritual sequel. It's got the same name convention. That was also very funny and very sweet. Maybe not quite as good as Pride and Prejudice. But my point is, coming back around to that point I was making earlier, Pride and Prejudice is about a young lady called Elizabeth Bennet who is very prejudiced against a very proud man called Fitzwilliam Darcy, Mr. Darcy as he's frequently known. He's a hard person to get on with. He has a very cold manner, and he comes across as quite rude. And this makes the people who he meets kind of dislike him, despite the fact that he's very rich and very handsome. He has a hard time wooing young ladies, and he has actually very high standards for women. And I have to say, he's brilliant. I said it on Twitter after reading it that the Pride and Prejudice is a book about Mr. Darcy. He's right about everything. He's right all the time, but he says it in such a blunt way that everyone hates him. It's kind of the gift that I posted with my analysis. If you've seen the show, what show is it from? Is it from the Eric Andre show? The guy saying, "Why are you booing me? I'm right." This is Mr. Darcy for the whole book. He's unlikable. He says everything he says is correct, but also makes him very much disliked. And Elizabeth Bennet, the main character, she's a quite fierce-spirited woman. She's quite modern, before her time, intelligent, and she hates Mr. Darcy perhaps the most of all. And this prejudice that she has against him leads her to believe a bunch of lies that someone else tells about him. And a complete stranger she's never met tells her some bad things about Mr. Darcy, and she just believes him because it confirms all of her, held biases that she has. And what happens after that? And what was the point I was making? Oh yeah, and then he also does some quite questionably, he does some legitimately quite bad stuff, and she hates him, basically. The midpoint in the novel, maybe like a third of the way through actually, she absolutely hates Mr. Darcy's guts. Well, I don't know who on earth needs spoilers for this book, but I won't go any further than that. Yes, indeed. Neon Realist in the chat says Mr. Darcy did nothing wrong. Absolutely correct. His only crime was being tomb-based. And the fact that Elizabeth Bennet, she hates Mr. Darcy, and then through a series of events, through a series of revelations, she comes to understand his character better, his personality better. She appreciates him more, and they fall in love. The end. And whatever. I won't say any more than that. But this, Jane Austen didn't know when she was writing this book, is that this framework, this plot, broadly, would become a trope known as hate to love, or enemies to lovers. I think I think those are the two names for the trope, where these two people hate each other. I think it's not really that Mr. Darcy hates Elizabeth. The first he finds her quite irritating because she is a little bit, she stands up for herself, and isn't quite, I don't know, up to his standards. He falls in love with her much previously to her falling in love with him. Anyway, this trope, I like this a lot. Don't ask why. I just like it. If I had to sum it up, I'd say that it's a brilliant it's a brilliant recipe for what I call moments of high drama, where you have these misunderstandings and lies. You have these really high tensions of bad things happening. Like if you've got two people who just like each other, and maybe something is in the way, or maybe they're just, I don't know. I find it hard to get engaged in a conflict if there is no real conflict, like a real personality conflict, and that's what I think is it's a framework of what I think is a really good romance. Actually, that wasn't in Sense and Sensibility, but the romance of that isn't quite the main source of the interest in that book. So that was just a good novel. I wasn't that kind of invested in the romance. Anyway, so these are like the tropes that I was looking for. I realized that there's a whole subculture of people looking for romance novels, and that there's a subculture of people who like hate to love, enemies to lovers, romance. So I looked at these. So all of that is just to say that I have a bit of a bias in terms of what I learnt from reading these books. It's not strictly homogenous across the genre, but I believe that it is a very popular genre. If you look at something like 50 Shades of Grey, which is one of the best-selling books ever, and the readership was almost entirely female, I understand. It's a similar structure. People have been using this hate to love, aloof millionaire kind of structure for a long time, and I could, if I was boiling it down to the absolute basics, which is what I'm doing in this stream, in this explanation, every love story is this. You've got a young lady. She's likable enough that the reader can put themselves in her position and sort of sympathize with her, or at least kind of get inside her head and appreciate what she's up to, and wish for her to good things to happen to her. Basically, a hero. The language of talking about romance, by the way, it's almost always a female main character. So we call that character the heroine, and it's the guy who she's in love with who's called the hero. It's just a bit confusing because in most fiction, the hero is the main character, but when talking about romance, the hero is the love interest, the hot guy, and the heroine is sort of the main character. So the heroine, she's likable, you want her to succeed, you want her to get with the hot guy, the hero. The hero is, to put it in the, to massively stereotype and to what am I saying? To simplify the matter, the hero is rich. He is tall. He's muscly. He's handsome. If you're reading a fantasy version of this story structure, he'll probably have like sexy scars on his face or body, and he'll probably be really good with a sword. In more modern adaptations, he's just muscly, and he's and then you get the same basic story structure that I just described. You get the tension because the woman doesn't really get along with him, and this is to analyze what's going on here. I want to. It's hard to take apart which parts of these tropes are there as the kind of fantasy fulfillment, the allure, if you will, of the pairing, of the relationship, of this hot guy fantasy, and what parts are there just as story components that you need to make a good story at all. I mean, the thing with romance is that, the thing with stories, I should say, is that you need to have a motivation, and you need to have barriers to achieving that motivation. This is the sort of basic stuff for making any kind of story. You've got a main character who wants something, and you've got a series of things that they need to do to get to that thing that they want. Whether it's something that, if Bilbo Baggins, for instance, is a bit of a complicated situation, but he basically wants to go home and be left alone. But actually he ends up being a kind of a heroic figure. So it's not always as simple as Elizabeth Bennet is quite suspicious of the idea of marriage. She'd rather stay single than get married to a guy she doesn't love, which is why she ends up refusing 2 proposals in the book. But anyway, in the end, she gets what she really wants, which is a hot guy like Mr. Darcy. Anyway, the thing is that I think this basic story structure, the fact that if your story is a romance, the thing that has to happen, the thing that you want to happen as a reader, is that this couple gets together. But you need to have a story, and 2 people who like each other who get married, that's not a story. You need to have a conflict or a barrier to this pairing. And the worst way of doing this is to have to write in a kind of a misunderstanding, which you could say Mr. Darcy is a little bit guilty of. But I think it's interesting in that case because it's actually a lie that's being told about him, not necessarily a misunderstanding. But anyway, the basic story structure, getting back to my point, what is going on in these stories? You've got this to put it simply, a high status man, and often he's he's absolutely not a nice guy. He's often like very possessive in a lot of these novels, as well as being all these other things I said. He's not very modern. He's not very female empowerment. He's usually quite um shut up and listen to me. Like, I don't want you seeing that guy anymore. There's a lot of aspects that are. It's interesting to look at the difference, they say, between what the kinds of men that women say they like or that they want to be with, and the men in these novels. And I am not saying that women want to be with these kinds of guys who are rude and possessive necessarily. It's interesting because it's a fantasy, and a lot of people make the analogy between romance novels and pornography. The way that women read romance novels is kind of similar to the motivations for men to consume pornography, and I think there is some truth to that. And to use an allegory that makes me less uncomfortable, you think about the movies, and men don't really read books quite as much, fiction books quite as much as women. But if you think about the kind of films and the kind of fiction that men read, it's usually about soldiers or secret agents, people, men who are getting themselves into physical danger, who are they're very skilled, they're good with guns or swords or whatever. They're always getting shot at, or things that most men would probably avoid in real life if given the opportunity to. There's certainly something going on there with male psychology about finding that sort of stuff exciting, and to want to simulate the experience of being in a battle, or being or saving thinking about the Taken. Sorry, just thinking about what I said reminded me of Liam Neeson saying he has a very particular set of skills. I think that's the fantasy. Men want to be Liam Neeson, who has a very particular set of skills, but no man would ever want to have their daughter kidnapped. That is not part of the fantasy. The fantasy is being Liam Neeson and having a very particular set of skills, and calling what is it he does? He like calls the guy on the phone, but the phone is listening to his walkie-talkie or something. Just like doing these really clever stuff, these clever tricks to get these guys, and that's the fantasy. The fact that his daughter is kidnapped is not part of the fantasy. That is part of the plot. And that's kind of what I'm getting at with some of these things, is that I'm trying to figure out what elements of these books are the fantasy and which parts are the plot. And what you get, I think, a lot of these bad qualities. Well, I say bad, but I'm not being judgmental here. But a lot of these things that the men in these stories, I'm talking about romance again now. The heroes in these stories are very flawed in some cases, and I think some of those flaws are sexy for women, but some of them are just a barrier for the relationship. And what I learned from these books, I think, the core of the fantasy, just like having a particular set of skills is the core of the male fantasy, the core of the female fantasy, in terms of romance, is to have this very attractive man, tall, muscly. I said all these things already. To have him be in love with, I'm going to say you, but I mean like the woman. A fantasy for a woman is to have a very attractive man be in love with her in a singularly dedicated way. In the same way that Mr. Darcy is in love with Elizabeth Bennet, she's quite poor compared to his family. Being poor is not part of the fantasy. Being poor is the barrier to their relationship, and was one of the barriers. And the fact that this barrier exists means it makes his love all the greater. It's a context for which his Mr. Darcy's love becomes greater because of the barrier that it has to overcome. And I think that is the that is the main theme of many of these stories, is that the bigger the barrier to the love, the greater the attraction must be for it to overcome. And so the more things the more sort of hoops the man has to jump through to get to the girl, the more things he has to overcome, the more in love he must be. And there's a lot of we have a lot of social rituals that who is it who says it? It's a biological term. I think it was Gad Sad who I heard saying it on Joe Rogan, that we have these costly signals that men demonstrate. They give women these costly signals to show that they are devoted. And probably the most easy to explain would be the engagement ring. That an engagement ring is quite pretty. I'm wearing one now. It's usually got diamonds in it. Why diamonds? You know, maybe they are a bit prettier than other precious stones, right? Maybe they look a bit nicer, but more than looking a bit nicer, they are much more expensive, like many times more expensive than other cut jewels. So why put them in the ring? Why not go for something cheaper? Because being expensive is the defining characteristic of an engagement ring, not the fact that it looks nice. The engagement ring is the costly signal that men give to women that they are dedicated to their relationship. I'm not endorsing engagement rings. I inherited this and hence got it essentially for free, and yet its value far exceeds the 3 month salary that my husband would have spent. He wouldn't have spent that much, believe me. But the 3 month salary that a man may have spent on an engagement ring for me, this means much more to me than that. And that all of that tangent is just to talk about the existence of costly signals. And romance novels are full of costly signals. Even the man's personal failings, his personality flaws, are just barriers for him to bring down. So if he starts off as genuinely as a jerk, and not just like a man who, you know, Mr. Darcy is actually quite a gentleman, but he's kind of got this social awkwardness, and also he is kind of proud, right? But he he is quite a gentleman. He never actually does anything really bad. But in many stories, the hero might actually do something quite bad. You know, he actually is quite rude or whatever. He has these flaws, these faults, and the fact that he's able to change himself to become better is one of those costly signals. He's so in love with the heroine that he's willing to change his own personality to do it. And what you see is a lot of these. I think it was what Jordan Peterson said when talking about romance novels is that the most popular heroes in these stories are, I'll try to remember them off the top of my head. It's quite embarrassing as a woman to say this: vampires, millionaires, and was it pirates? I would add I haven't seen any pirate fiction, by the way. I've never seen a pirate romance novel, so I think he might have he got that wrong, or maybe he's just looking at different lists. But what I saw was a lot of mafia, like specifically mafia romance novels, and I wonder if these were inspired by The Godfather. The main character in The Godfather is he's quite attractive. I wonder if it inspired a whole subgenre of romance fiction. I've got a question from Tom Merchant about Brokeback Mountain. Would you consider the story in that film to be akin to a romance novel? Yes, absolutely. I quite like Brokeback Mountain. I think I've only seen it once, but it's very well done. Probably one of the best romance, like pure drama romance movies I can think of. Most romance movies are romantic comedies, which is fine, but I think when I'm talking about anime, there's also this like romantic comedy element, but somehow even even the funny parts are more separated from the sincere parts in romantic comedies often. Anyway, the thing with Brokeback Mountain is another sort of sub point I want to get to. Um, Something that has become more and more popular has been the. It's so funny. What it's called in the like if you look on Reddit and stuff, they call it like LGBT fiction. But what it is, it's gay, it's male, it's man for man fiction. It's gay romance novels. Um, homosexual men, and it's interesting to me because I think it's a good demonstration of the barrier, the conflict thing I'm talking about. Because what could be a greater conflict? I mean, with Brokeback Mountain, the fact that society rejects them is a huge conflict in that relationship. And the fact that they're both married, or is any one of them married? Anyway, that's a huge conflict. Don't get me wrong, but these days the modern gay romance is about it's more about like usually one of the guys at least is straight to begin with, I believe. And so what is a bigger barrier to a relationship than the fact that one of them is gay and one of them is straight? It's yeah, that's how it I think that's the appeal of the gay. I haven't read any of these, by the way. This is what I'm guessing is that what is being called LGBT inclusion, you know, pride, all of this. It's really more of a kind of fetishization of gay relationships by straight women, which I think is I think it's rather funny. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. The thing is that I think men have a hard time understanding what this about women, that a woman can enjoy a a gay book like that, or might even find it sexually appealing to read about two men having sex. Well, I guess it's not that weird because men do the same thing with gay women. So what am I talking about? No, I've never seen a BL anime. When I'm talking about romance, it's similar. The only reason I brought up the porn connection is because it's the muscles. It's like why are the men always tall with muscles? This is obviously not purely. It's not an innocent romance, is it? I mean, Mr. Darcy, he's described as handsome. They say he has very fine features, but he's never described as being tall or muscly. I've just have to say that. The modern romance novels, the men are always tall and muscly. And I don't know about you guys, maybe I'm just unfortunate, but I think in my whole life, I've only met, I don't mean like seen, I've only met like maybe one or two men who were tall, muscly, and straight, and like intelligent. Like most of the muscly men I've ever met have been what could you call like the kind of jock stereotype, like not very smart. I'm not I'm not saying that lifting weights makes you dumb, but it seems to be that the kind of guys who really care about having that like really buff muscly look, they tended to be they like sports. They're really not interested in the kind of stuff I'm interested in, and they're like not particularly intelligent. Is that really mean? I'm not saying that's a hashtag not all, not all, not all, not all. And like I said, I have met a few men who are, all the full package. And one of them is my cousin, so I can't possibly speculate about his about his physical attractiveness. But I just have to be honest that I have met a few, and I guess being tall runs in my family, except for the women. Anyway, the thing is that the fact that they are muscly and tall, and the fact that they are muscly and tall is constantly referred to in the text, and that there often includes a usually quite graphic sex scene in the like the whole book. Like you read like 300 or 400 pages, and then maybe like 4 of those pages will be a I say graphic, but it's also quite emotional often. and there's anyway, it's being written that way for a reason, and there is that comparison to make with pornography, but I think it's a much more emotional experience. That it's like the women who read these, they need all of that story in order to enjoy that that graphic sex scene. That they need to have proof that this guy is worth this. They need all of these these costly signals, and all of this sort of build up in order for this to be attractive. And then when that's over, there's still like a third of the book left often, or like half of it even, and they're obviously not, they're not expecting to read any more steamy scenes in the rest of it, but they still read it all the way to the end. Yes, Song of Achilles. It's exactly. I got that recommended a lot. I read the. That's a gay one, by the way. I believe Achilles. I haven't read it, but it's about what do you call it? A common man, a young man who's like not royalty or not highborn, who has some kind of relationship with Achilles. I've only read the sample on Amazon. You get these samples of the first like 2 chapters, first 30 pages or something. So I've read a lot of these samples, and I've only read a few of the novels because I often get turned off by the sample. If I get intrigued by the cover and the blurb and the reviews, I often get turned off by the actual sample at the beginning, because there's all of this like, oh, his voice was so deep and his eyes were so piercing and blue. They were so glistening in emeralds, this like muscly and tall and deep voiced, and I don't know. This, I'm not judging anyone, but that's not what I'm looking for. I want Mr. Darcy. I want to read about a guy who is genuinely quite annoying, who turns out to be nice at the end. And what was the point about Song of Achilles? Yeah, so it's taking some liberties with the source material of the what would it be? Not the Odyssey, the Iliad, and I guess Achilles also appears in other fiction. I don't know, actually. Is Achilles? I mean, Achilles definitely features heavily in the Iliad, but I don't know if he's also like important to, like, is all of the. I don't know. I don't know anything about like classics, obviously, but I know that he was dipped in that river that made him invincible, and his mother held him by his ankle, and that's why he was. But then is that legend then described in the Iliad, which is where the legend comes from, or was that like known? Was that a widely known fact about Achilles? Anyway, yes, he dies in the Iliad. Thanks for spoilers for a 2,000-year-old story. Are there any? Sorry, I've got a question here. Are there any successful commercial male authors of straight romance fiction books? It's hard to tell because authors often use a pseudonym, and a lot of male authors are actually women. But there are I don't know if you recall, a film came out recently, not recently, like in 2012, I want to say, called One Day, and that was adapted from a very popular novel about it was basically When Harry Met Sally, but it was less comedic. I didn't read it, but anyway, it was adapted from a novel. It's romance written by a man, and Song of Achilles was my first LGBT book, and I instantly got my second favorite book. Who what was? Notebook.
Yeah,
the Notebook, I guess, was. Yeah, I guess the Notebook author. Or the director. Anyway, that's a maybe. That sounds right though, but it could be a woman writing under a man's name. I really don't know. And yeah, so there's your answer. I mean, men seem to get this, and they write straight romance. I also should say, when I was talking about anime, I know there's going to be a few people watching this who are, men of culture, who enjoy a bit of anime, and the the thing it was with anime is that a lot of the really good romance shows and films, they are written for, I say films, I mean just shows really, but they are written for men and by men. I'm talking about things like Clannad and Toradora. I wrote down a few. Fruits Basket is one written by a woman for women. I really liked that as a teenager. But these straight romances, in Japan there's a weird I want to call it subculture, but there's a subgenre of romance that is written, kind of a mature romance for I don't want to say older men, but like adult men. It's not sexual. It often involves like teenage characters, and they have these like very sweet, innocent romances, and I really enjoy that. If you ever watched Toradora, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Or Clannad indeed, and that's kind of what I'm looking for. I went looking through romance novels, looking for something that would scratch that like itch that I used to scratch from reading Toradora and Fruits Basket and these really dramatic, sweet romance stories. I wanted to read stuff like that, and like I said, Pride and Prejudice was great, and I think I'm far enough into this stream now to admit something extremely, two things that are extremely embarrassing. The first is that I ended up reading fan fiction, and I won't tell you what fandom, because that is just too embarrassing. But I will admit that I found some very good fiction in the fan fiction, and I know fan fiction has a bad reputation, and I was the I was the quickest to discredit fan fiction in the past. But it's not all just characters having sex and and Sonic the Hedgehog having sex with Shrek or whatever. It's not all sexual, and I think because fan fiction is so intertwined with the anime community, like there's a big Venn diagram, there's a big crossover in that Venn diagram, and I think there's a lot of writers of fan fiction who have that same affinity for for anime style romance stories that I was looking for. And the second embarrassing thing I have to tell you is that I wrote a romance book, and I self-published it last year, using everything that I learned, and trying to make something that would perfectly encapsulate everything that I was trying to look for. So it doesn't really fit into that many subgenres. I think it's good. People who've read it think it's good. I'm not going to tell you what it's called or how to find it. It's not written by Poe the person, and it's not even under my real name. But if you like romance and you want to read it, then send me a DM on Twitter. Send me an email. Someone in the chat has read it, who got in touch, and they liked it. So it's not furry, okay? I'm not into furries. Stop speculating. And that's it was embarrassing, and people don't really get that, but I was very afraid to even let anyone in my life read it. And it's set in modern era. It's not historical. It's contemporary, and it's not set in COVID times. It's someone in the chat I think has heard of it. It's I incorporated some aspects of the Ayn Rand heroic archetype into it, and I should say that actually Ayn Rand wrote these very I always don't want to say romantic because they were so sexualized in the books, these I should say compelling love stories into Atlas Shrugged and into The Fountainhead, which are the only books I've read. I didn't even finish Atlas Shrugged because it was way too long, but the love story in The Fountainhead. I don't want to say it's good. I mean, it's not. It's not what I would be looking for. I mean, it's well written. Yeah, it's like very. It's very sexual, and I kind of like the thing with a lot of these stories, which I was going to get around to. Kind of what I'm saying again about the difference between fantasy and reality is that I'm often left at the end of a romance novel. Once the characters are together, I'm kind of left with this feeling that I don't think these people would be a good couple. Like, to be, assuming they get married at the end, which is kind of implied if it's not explicitly stated, then I, what is bringing them together is this like very fiery rapport. This spicy relationship they have. But there's often not any indication that these characters are actually compatible, and that they would be, these very. What I'm saying about the male heroes, these very qualities that make him attractive to the woman, or to make their relationship more dramatic, that introduce this conflict into the story. These are the very same characteristics that would probably make him quite a difficult husband to live with. And I'm often worried, I'm left at the end worrying that this couple is not going to be very happy together, 10 or 20 years down the line. That's another thing that all these things that I'm complaining about, I tried to avoid in my own story. And that's really why I was thinking about it so hard. It's just thinking that trying to avoid all the things that I hate in the stories that I was reading. And Look, I couldn't avoid making the hero tall. That's just, it was too tempting. But he wasn't muscly, and I didn't constantly refer to the color of his eyes. A small tangent here. How long is it? Well, look, if it's good, you should want to read it. But in fact, because I was quite insecure about making it. I thought if it was long, people wouldn't want to read it, because all the people who would be reading it. This is what I was thinking when I was writing. All the people who would want to read it, I thought, would not want to. They'd be doing it as a favor to me, and they would not. I wouldn't waste their time with hundreds and hundreds of pages. It ended up being 125 pages, I think, less than 130 pages, and well, it's hard to tell how many. I think it's like 30,000 words, and I submitted it to a publisher of romance novels. It was quite interesting to find out about the publication process. If you're interested, I'll briefly tell you. The process of submitting a novel to a publisher is that you give them the first 3 chapters and a kind of in-depth summary of the entire story, and by that they will judge whether they want to publish it, because the readers, the people who are paid to read these submissions, don't even have time to read an entire book, so they'll decide whether they want to read more if they read the first 3 chapters. Announce the book and put the price up first. Okay, well, this leads me up to my next point. I'm currently writing another book, and a few of you have probably read it in the chat. Has AA read your fan fiction? I didn't. Never mind. I have a new book coming out. Since writing, I released that first romance book last year, and I really loved writing. I would like throw myself into it for hours. I really enjoyed it. I often couldn't sleep because the ideas for scenes would be like embedded in my head, and I wouldn't be able to sleep until I'd at least like sketched out an outline for those scenes that I could so vividly picture. So I loved all of that process, and I would frequently sort of surprise myself with coming up with these sort of neat little details that would then fit. It was like doing a kind of puzzle where I'm writing out these big scenes, and then I'd have to come up with like a detail about some part of the scenery or a character quirk or a figure of speech that would then become a little bit of banter, or it would become a callback later. It's all just really good fun. If you've never written anything, I would truly recommend it. And while writing that, I had an idea for another novel, which I've now almost finished. So this one is not a romance. It's if I had to classify it, I'd say it's more of a young adult fiction, but it's really just kind of general fiction. To call it literary fiction would be giving myself too much credit, but it's not it's a character study, you could say. And so my neighbours are making some noise outside the window. I hope you can't hear that. That one, I'm less embarrassed about that one, so I will soon be, as soon as it's done, what I'm going to do is I'm going to record an audiobook of it. That's going to be up on probably a different channel on an unlisted video, and I'll be charging probably $7.99 for that, which is the price that Amazon Audible service charges for audiobooks. So I think that's a fair price. It's a slightly longer novel, and I think you're going to enjoy it, and I hope some of you will listen to it. And obviously, the thing is that I'm gonna publish the PDF as well. You know, the Kindle. Yes, Tale Feature has read it. It's changed a bit since then. I submitted it to a few of my friends for kind of proofreading to get their opinions on it, and I've got a lot of really good feedback and taken that on, added stuff, taken stuff out, all of that, changed things. So I think it's good, and as soon as it's done, I'll be publishing it as... It'll also be published as a paperback book, and there'll also be a special edition that comes in a special case. I won't go into details about that now, but there's going to be loads of ways to read it. I just assumed that people who know me from YouTube, which I expect will be 100%, almost 100% of the audience who actually read the book, they're going to want to have it as an audiobook because they're used to listening to my voice anyway. Are you using Poe the Person as an author name? No, I'm writing under a pseudonym. So my new book will be published under the same pseudonym as my old book. My first book, I should say. And so you can... Once that's out, everyone will be able to see my first romance novel. But for now, I'm keeping it secret still. And like I said, email me if you want to read it. And I'll send you a link to the Amazon. It's only... The Kindle version is $1.99. And there's a paperback for which I designed the cover myself, which is what they tell you never to do because I'm a little bit of an illustrator. Can I even call myself an artist? Probably not, but I do enjoy graphic design, and I didn't want to invest even like any money into this novel that I didn't think would sell, so I designed the cover myself, and I've also designed the cover for the new one. So it's all ready to go as soon as I'm kind of happy with it, and then I'll record the audiobook, and then everything will be published at the same time. How long have I been talking for? Because I've talked all this time without looking at my notes, and I just want to make sure I haven't missed anything really important. I think one of the main things that I didn't use a female name or a male name. I just used the sort of JK, GRRM, G.R.R. Martin, J.R.R. Tolkien. No, I just did like initials, so it's not male or female. And what I want to say about romance, in case, well, I don't know, I think I've been pretty fair to women, to romance readers, but I think it's notable to think about the things that do not appear in female fiction. So the heroines in romance novels, they for instance don't often have romantic interest in more than one man. The classic thing for a young adult novel is for there to be like two guys, like, which one am I going to go out with? Like, there's two guys, Edward Cullen and that werewolf. I've never read Twilight, but I understand that there's a werewolf and there's a vampire, and she has to choose between them. And I haven't actually come across that trope in adult fiction, but I don't know. But the thing is that what I'm saying is that the heroes the heroines in these stories, they never, as far as I'm aware, they don't sleep around. They're not known for their like promiscuity. They might allude to an earlier time when they have had sex with another man, but inside the novel, in the fantasy, you can say the part of the novel that was worth writing, that not set in the past, but the actual events of the story, the woman, as far as I can tell, never or hardly ever has sex with more than one man. She's very dedicated to the hero. So that's I think that is part of the female kind of fantasy, is that the perfect man, or even just a great guy, is so great that you can, it's not hard to be faithful to him. Your love is so enduring that to even think about that would be uh, it would break the fantasy, basically. I've got a super chat from the English Loyalist. Thank you very much. Make a book on the saga of the coffee between you and AA. I will buy your book, but I will give it to a woman. Thank you. Not into history, not that genre. Oh, sorry, you're into history, but not not romance. Yeah, well, sure, give it to a woman. I mean, like I said, it's only 130 pages, so it's shorter than most novels. It started off as a novella, which is, I found out, a novella is any novel that is shorter than 25,000 words, or is it shorter than 20,000 words? There's a word count, and one word one word more than the word count makes it a novel, and one word less makes it a novella. And I've got someone in the comments says you could own the market on based romance novels. Don't even joke about that, because I've been I'm already thinking about my next novel, and I don't know if I'll read it or if I'll publish it under. I don't know if I'll publicize it under my Poe the Person. I'll advertise it as myself, but it's my next idea for my next novel is extremely based, and basically an allegory for current politics. I'll say no more than that, because it really is. It's too based to even talk about on YouTube. Oh dear. Never mind. Okay, let's have a quick look at my notes and see if I forgot to say anything. If you wondered what it looks like, this is what my notes look like. This is a full page of A4. How's everyone doing tonight? Tell me in the chat. I wrote the word sensible down. These male heroes, other than being muscly and tall and having a deep voice, they're always very sensible. They, apart from being quite possessive and like not being a very good boyfriend in that kind of sense, they they're very pragmatic. Often the men, they're not like they'll that's the thing I'm talking about. So they're so sensible in most things that it makes it all the more dramatic when they suddenly like lose their mind out of love. When they suddenly do something impulsive and ridiculous. It's so out of character that it makes the drama even more poignant. That's what I'm saying about so being sensible, to put it in a single word, this character trait of being pragmatic and sort of just useful, and being stoic and having a cool head. All these things are these things that women find attractive, or are these things that serve a purpose in the conflict? Is this just a way to show how much in love he is, that even a sensible man like this will lose his mind out of love? That it'll make him do these crazy things. My hat looks like it will end the video and go tend to my garden in a quaint English cottage. Yeah, well, kind of, almost that. Sorry, I'm just going to turn my lights on. I know it looks like I'm getting brighter, but actually that's because the room is getting darker as the sun goes down outside, and the screen is lighting me from the front, and soon it will look very unflattering if it continues. Can I just mute myself? Isn't that better? Thank you for waiting. Yeah, like I explained at the start of the stream, the hat is weird. Yeah, I think it's to put it into like a few words, the fantasy is to be wanted, like to be wanted this intensely, as be wanted as intensely as Elizabeth Bennet is wanted by Mr. Darcy. You know, to be singularly wanted. And these men, the thing is that they always have other options. And like I said, the options are, yeah, I mean, when I say options, I mean that there are other women that the guy could be with. This hero, he has often, like very explicitly, other women who are showing interest in him or like literally throwing themselves at him. And the fact that he's turning them down, this is another like costly signal, right? This is a way of him saying like, I'm so in love, I couldn't possibly, even though she's not even my girlfriend, I could not betray this woman, you know, the heroine, the one I'm in love with, the one he's in love with, I should say. And but then also, you could also see that the other way, which is that being wanted by women is actually a good indicator of being a kind of a worthwhile man, to being like a high status, you know, being muscular and handsome and rich. It's like these are all things that probably would attract women, maybe not in quite the way that it's written, but do you know what I'm saying? I don't know whether this not yeah, this popularity with women in the novel, it serves as a just another proof of his love, but it is also a proof of his status. It works both ways. I think that's probably why it works so well in the novels, is that it's good for both. Two birds with one stone. But I can't say for sure whether this is a good whether that is something that women are genuinely attracted to in men. This is something that the academic agent was saying in his stream last night, is that I mean, it's it's a well observed phenomenon. It's frequently observed that women are like buses, and you wait around for ages for one, and then three come along at once. And it does seem to, you know, I have heard reports often that if you're a man and you're with a woman, often you'll find yourself with a kind of abundance of other women who you have to turn down, just because the fact that you're with a woman makes you, you know, seem like you're like a worthwhile guy. Like, this is a guy who other women are attracted to. Like, I could, there must be something good about him. there's no better social proof than the approval of another woman, really, especially if that woman is like really attractive. Anyway, the one of the things I've talked about before on this channel is the way that women are often analyzing each other. They assess each other on beauty and style and personality, and this is all kind of an interconnected game. I'm sounding very like PUA MGTOW right now, but like on a deep psychological, like subconscious level, there's this game that's always being played with men and women, and also between women, of subconsciously, like, just being aware of each other's status. And a man's status is somewhat, you know, defined by the woman he's with, just like a woman's status is kind of defined by the man that she's with. That's my point anyway. There's often this trope of the it happens in Pride and Prejudice, where Mr. Darcy turns, who is it? I'm trying to remember what the character's name is, but there's a young lady who's the dialogue reveals her to be quite silly. You know, compared to Elizabeth, who's quite sensible and intelligent. There's this quite silly young lady. I really don't remember her name, but she's been quite flirty with Mr. Darcy, and he just like shuts her down, like, you know, begone thought. And it's fun. It works because it's a funny scene, but also he does it right in front of Elizabeth, and it's got this. I mean, it works beautifully because she just uses this as more evidence that this guy's a jerk, when really it's evidence that he's in love with Elizabeth, and that he likes intelligent women. He likes sort of sensible, intelligent women, which is why he's shutting down this silly lady. What is her name? I can't. I think she is. Gosh, she's sort of friends with his younger sister. But I can't remember how she's even related to the main cast. Someone in the Caroline Bingley. Yes, it's Bingley's younger sister. That's it. Yeah, that's Caroline Bingley. Absolutely brilliant. You guys should watch one of the adaptations if you don't want to read. The adaptation that I put in the thumbnail, was it 2005? I think with no, I can't remember. Keira Knightley is the plays Elizabeth, and there's who's the Gone Girl? Rosamund Pike is, I think, she's Jane, and something McFadden, he plays Mr. Darcy. And the wonderful, I've heard other people say this about him. The most endearing thing about Mr. Darcy in this adaptation, more than the book and more than the other adaptations, is that Mr. Darcy is so socially awkward in this adaptation. I find it extremely endearing. McFadden. He plays Mr. Darcy very awkward, and it's funny, but it's also very sweet. No, not the Colin Firth one. That's an older one from the 90s. Yeah, it's a BBC adaptation. I mean, the thing is, yeah, Rosamund Pike. She plays like the cuter younger sister. Anyway, that's the thing. I mean, I don't really want to. I don't want to be too harsh on modern romance novels, but what I found from reading a lot of them kind of feeds back to this idea that it's all just a fantasy. This Matthew McFadden? Okay. The conflict that's introduced, it often feels, it's like you can see through it too easily, where it's like, you know that guy in The Matrix who he says he doesn't even see the code anymore, he just sees like blonde, brunette, redhead. It's like that's me reading romance novels where as soon as like a new element gets introduced, I'm instantly assessing it for like its for the trope. You know, what trope is this? Like, what purpose is this serving to the plot? Is Jane older than Elizabeth? I thought she was a younger sister. I thought Elizabeth was the oldest one. Maybe she is older. Okay, never mind. Anyway, she's more attractive anyway. And that's the most important thing, is that she's the cute one, and she's got this really endearing, like naive personality. Not in a stupid way. She just her personality, her main personality trait is that she believes the best in everybody. She refuses to believe anything bad about anyone, which is, it's very sweet. Yeah. So I don't know. In a good romance novel, I feel like the conflict should feel real, rather than just feel like an artificial barrier that's just been put up, that you know, as soon as it's there, you know it's just going to be brought down, and you can see it happening. And you know, if it's a misunderstanding, for instance, like I said, this is one of the worst ways that you can do the conflict thing, is just to get a, you know, they misunderstand something about each other. You know, he thinks that she's already married, or like she thinks that he had something to do with something bad that happened. Yeah, that's the Pride and Prejudice version of it. Like I said, I think it was done quite well in that one, but it's like as soon as it comes up, this misconception that they have, this, you know, misunderstanding, you go like, oh, okay, well, all that it's going to take to sort this out is to get these two in a room and to talk to each other, and then it's over. Once they understand that, you know, this thing, oh, I got it wrong, never mind, sorry, it's over. You know, you can already see the conflict is not really real, and it's all just there to, you know, as a like I say, it's all just a fantasy. You know, that's why it's like the muscly thing. It's just it takes away your immersion, and immersion is quite a difficult thing to kind of quantify, because you can have a story where uh, I like reading science fiction. I like reading fantasy, and if you tell me that there's a book about a colony on the moon where the people on Earth send all of their criminals, I'll be like, yeah, okay. And then what happened? But if you tell me that there's a story where a muscly, tall, deep voiced, sexy millionaire falls in love with his secretary and dumps his hot girlfriend and they get married at the end, I'll go like, that didn't happen. I don't believe this. I can't immerse myself in this kind of story. And the concept of that is called suspension of disbelief. I think the example that's often quoted is that if you're watching Superman or you're reading a Superman comic, you can easily accept that Superman is an alien that comes from another planet and that he has heat vision, super speed, he can fly. But what you can't believe is that the people who know Clark Kent are, he's not wearing a disguise when he's Superman. That's the thing. He doesn't wear a mask. All he has is like a little, he has like a little curl of hair that comes down, and he's not wearing glasses, and he's wearing a different outfit, and yet people can't recognize him. That is suspension of disbelief. When you find yourself, sorry, I've gone all fuzzy. That's much worse. Okay, all good. Yeah, internal consistency, exactly. So you can't believe that the people who meet Superman cannot recognize him as Clark Kent, and it's a strange kind of phenomenon in the human mind that there just are things that you can believe and things you can't. I'm working my way through these notes. Sorry. Okay, I got a quote from Mr. Darcy here. When I was thinking about making this in videos, I would put a clip in. But I'll read it for you now, and I'm sure the Pride and Prejudice fans will appreciate it. Imagine that I'm a dashing 10,000 a year young bachelor, and he says to Elizabeth, "In vain I have struggled. It will not do. My feelings will not be repressed. You must allow me to tell you how ardently I admire and love you." Brilliant. It's a brilliant quote. In the context of the novel, so shocking and so sweet. And that's what I'm saying, is that this is the fantasy. This guy, he struggled against. He loves her despite his better judgment. He's struggled against how much he loves her. His love is so powerful that he cannot repress it. That's the core of the fantasy that I'm talking about. Yeah, that's it. That's the end of my notes. The connection that the hero has, like I was saying about how that he will often like turn down silly women or thoughts, or just any other woman other than the heroine. He is to emphasize that this guy, this hero, he has a deep spiritual connection with the heroine that's often kind of emphasized. There's something about her that he really likes, whether it's that they have something in common or that she supports him in a way that other women don't. And there's this, I don't know, there's this feeling that she's either different or like better than other women sometimes, and this can get like a little bit another like suspension of disbelief, like, oh, you're the only woman who's not a nag. Like I can't. It's sometimes hard to believe that the woman can be this special, that she would so utterly win over this guy. And I think it's, I don't know, maybe AA put it the best last night. An academic agent, when talking about dating, The way he talks about it, it sounds like he's had a lot of girlfriends, or been on a lot of dates, I should say. And he said that his wife was the like one of the ones who fought with him the most. You know, he liked that she could go toe to toe with him, and that is actually often that is like a very common theme. Is like the headstrong woman, the outspoken. The heroine is like, she's intelligent. She can talk fast. She tells this guy off for his bad behavior. This is the woman who can challenge him that he's never met before. She's like his equal. This Elizabeth Bennet might not quite be this, but I think it's a good trope. It's when I can believe that this woman is special enough to be good enough to deserve this devotion, it's a lot easier to believe anyway. I guess I could talk about. I mean, I saw a great video. I'll just kind of refer you to that if I can remember the name of the channel. My throat is going really raw, so I'm gonna have to go. And it's been like more than an hour of me just talking. But a channel I saw did a great breakdown of Toradora, explaining. I mean, Toradora is a show about. It's really like the plot doesn't really take you by surprise, but you really are along for the ride. So I feel like I won't be spoiling anything by saying that the two main characters, they start off being in love, having a crush on someone else, and then by the end of the show they realize that they are in love with each other. It's kind of like what is it? Like 12th Night, I want to say, like Midsummer Night's Dream. That kind of like love triangle, love square type of thing, where both these characters, they start off seeking out parts of their personality that they think are missing. So the guy who's quite dark and people are kind of scared of him because he looks scary, and he has like his dad is like a criminal, and he wants to get as far away from that as possible. So he seeks out this girl who's like a ray of sunshine. She's like so funny and cute, and she just makes people laugh, makes people happy. So that's the kind of person he's seeking out, and that's the girl that he has a crush on initially. But actually, that's all just superficial stuff, and he really just has to get over himself and realize that what he really needs in his life is Tiger. Anyway, if you've seen the show, you understand what I'm talking about. Anyway, my poor throat. The last thing, I know this is a bit abrupt. The last thing I have to say before I go and have like a glass of water is that I've left a link in the. Sorry, I'm out of focus. It's really an awful thing about this camera. I've left a link in the description to an event which I will be speaking at the end of August. If you're a fan of The Academic Agent, you will already know about it. Lots of YouTubers from this small sub-community will be there. People interested in politics, in what would you call it, in ethics? I don't know. People who are interested in politics, who are of the same kind of opinions. Of course, I don't endorse the opinions of anyone who's speaking at this event, but you know what I mean. Other people will be there. If you go to the link, you'll see the other confirmed speakers, and there are other speakers who will be there anyway. Yes, I'm going. I'll be speaking. I've got an outline written for my, what do you call it, a speech? My talk I'll be giving. And I'm really excited about it because, not just because I haven't been to an event in like 2 years, but also this is just the first YouTube event I've been to. I went to the Brexit, what do you call it, the Brexit day, Brexit night in London, where I met a few of the people that I've met through YouTube virtually, but I met them in person. That was quite exciting. But this is going to be that times 10. There's going to be loads of people there. And yeah, I hope to see some of you there. I'd love to, just get a drink and talk. Very, informal. You can come to my talk, obviously. But yeah, I just love to just, like, talk one-on-one with some people, and I think that'd be really fun. I don't get to, like, there's so many people who watch my videos. I'm not like bragging. I'm talking, you know what my numbers are like, but it's just so weird that it's all one way. You know, like you get to hear me talking all the time, and I just like get these like one sentence messages from you guys, and I'm so curious about the kinds of people who are interested in what I'm saying. Anyway, go to the link, and like I said, if you want to read my romance novel that I wrote last year, send me a DM, send me an email. We'll sort something out. But absolutely no pressure to do that. If you don't like romance novels, you probably won't like it. It's very, like, there's not really much else there. But there isn't, like I said, I'll remind you, there is a new novel coming out soon, so look out for that. And I'll leave it there for today. Thank you very much.